Good afternoon, everyone. I am Professor George Mangero from the LaPenta School of Business at Iona College. And as chair of the Business Analytics Task Force, I'm delighted that you could join us today to hear our panel of industry and academic experts talk about careers in business analytics, what new hires in the field should know, and what the future holds in terms of best practices and challenges. But to maximize our time together, let me introduce my colleague, a member of the Business Analytics Task Force, Professor Karen Parrish. She will facilitate today's panel. So Karen.
Thanks, George. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Before I dive in, just a couple of housekeeping things. I would ask that you put your cameras on. It's just a lot more fun and a lot more interactive if we can actually see each other. So I'd appreciate that if you're in a place where you can do that. I would also ask that you mute your lines, obviously everybody other than the speakers. This way we can eliminate the background noise. And I want to let you know that at the end of the time that we're spending together, I'm going to leave about 5 to 10 minutes to open it up to questions in the audience. And we're going to do that via a chat session. And Professor Kinkela is going to be helping me with that. And we want to make sure that we can address all of your questions. So if we don't get to your question during the time that we're here together, we will follow up and make sure that your question gets answered by one of our panelists. So without further ado, let me do a brief introduction and I'll turn it over to the panelists. We have 4 individuals with us today, all experts in their field and all deeply focused in the space of data analytics. Jason Guthrie is the managing director of EY. We have Edgar Abreu, who's vice president of audit and a real focus on data science. He's the leader of that space at Synchrony. We have Charlie Stites, who's the vice president of audit. He also manages the information technology Sarbanes-Oxley space at Synchrony. And then we have Dr. Alex Sinella, who's professor of accounting and information systems at Rutgers University. Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. What I'd like to do is ask each of our panelists to just spend a little bit of time sharing with you their background, a little bit about the organizations that they work for and their perspective on what they think is going to be happening in the data and analytics space. And then we'll jump into the Q&A. So let me turn it over to our first panelist. George, if we can advance the slide. It's Jason Guthrie. So Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hey, Karen, thanks. And it's good to be with you all this afternoon. As Karen said, my name is Jason Guthrie. I'm a managing director at EY. I'm part of our national office, or what we call America's Professional Practice, where I lead our digital audit efforts. And so that entails kind of the working on methodology, learning, enablement, things like that to help our auditors all throughout the Americas use data to audit faster and better, essentially. I also am involved in certifying new tools as we develop tools in-house or use third-party tools and tailor them for our needs in audit. We certify those tools for broad use by our auditors and making sure they have everything they need to be successful. And I also am EY's representative on a number of different working groups related to data analytics, specifically the AICPA and PCAOB working groups on data analytics, which is always fun to collaborate and work with colleagues across some of the other firms in public accounting. So I did just a quick note on my background. I have a bachelor's and a master's from BYU, where I studied accounting and then focused on auditing. I did get a minor in information systems, which pegged me as kind of the data geek or the data nerd as soon as I started my career at EY. So I was the one of my first jobs in the Bay Area in California to kind of work with data. And back then it was primarily journal entry testing. And I had learned ACL at school and was the guy on my team who was dealing with journal entry testing. So that morphed over time into a fascination and a love of data analytics. And so as I did a stint in our national office, it became a kind of a full-time job for me, helping our teams figure out ways to use analytics throughout the audit. So I left California though, excuse me, and I'm now in Cleveland, where there's about a foot of snow on the ground here. So still getting used to that after all these years. But you know, the only other thing I'd mention is, you know, I do have a great passion for analytics, and it has a benefit not only on our practice today, but has a huge potential for changing the way that we perform audits of our clients. And so that's why I'm so involved, not only within the firm, but outside of the firm, of trying to you know, push this agenda forward with some of our regulators and standard setters, because I really do believe it has a huge part in the future of audit. Especially as we start to meld analytics with some of the other emerging technologies like AI, there's a great potential to be another tool in our tool belt to audit faster and better. So I'm happy to be here today and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Jason. That was excellent. I really appreciate it. Edgar, we're going to move over to you. If we could advance to the next slide, please.
Okay, great. Edgar Abreu. I lead the data science team within internal audit at Synchrony. So Synchrony is a retail credit card company. It also has a bank. It's in the financial services industry. And our team within internal audit is tasked with providing data analytics support. And also,
Edgar, excuse me, we're having a little trouble hearing you. Perhaps your mic is being muffled somehow.
what about now?
It's not much better.
Let's see.
That's better.
Yeah, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So what we do is we provide data analytics support and training to the internal audit department, and not only to other data science individuals, but mostly for auditors who don't have the experience. So we kind of help upskill them and train them to perform data analytics for the internal audit department. We've also expanded that role to help training individuals within the organization as well, throughout the organization. So I have over 20 years of data analytics experience. Right out of college, I went into auditing, and you know, I basically started with ACL, and since then have been using data analytics for my audit testing with various different companies and different industries. I am certified public accountant, certified internal auditor, information systems auditor, and I have the ACL certification. I also lead a co-founder and leader of a local analytics peer group. And most recently, I've been focused on innovation and automation, but more importantly, building data analytics teams within audit departments. For example, previous to Synchrony, I also worked at GE Capital and helped build the audit data analytics team there for credit review, and anything and everything that has to do with audits and data analytics. I told you a little bit about the company. The growth areas, I think, for data analytics is, for specifically speaking in terms of audit, I think we're going to see a lot more data analytics throughout the audit process from beginning to end. We're going to see more and more advanced analytics like predictive analytics, machine learning to help out with testing, be more efficient and effective with our testing. But more importantly, I think we're also going to see a lot of training traditional auditors, training those auditors that may not have had that background with data analytics skills, so they can also perform their testing using data analytics, kind of sharing the wealth, if you will. So that's kind of where I see data analytics going in terms of audit, in the audit space.
Great. Thank you very much. That's very insightful. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we build teams around analytics. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. Let's
Great.
go over to Charlie. Charlie, I'd love to hear a little bit about you.
Sure, absolutely. So currently, I, as you mentioned, work in Synchrony's internal audit department, managing the SOX IT testing, testing the IT controls for our compliance with Sarbanes-Oxley, government regulation around financial reporting. I moved to this role in November from Edgar's team. So prior to this role, I was actually working for Edgar as one of his data science team members. A big part of me moving to this role was tasking to find ways to automate the testing that these IT SOX testers do, and also to better leverage the data that comes out of our process and controls and try to provide data analytics around those controls. Pursuant to this role change, I'm still going to be working with Edgar, helping to train our internal audit team members in the Data Intelligence Academy that we run on data analysis techniques in tools like SAS and Python and possibly even R. My background includes, I spent 6 years in the Navy, which is where I had my introduction to computers. I was working with radars and radios and other signal processing systems. And my command asked me to get cross-trained in IT systems. So computers and networks like we would use every day in business. That led, upon my leaving the Navy, that led to 7 years of IT and project management career roles. And while I was working in the IT and project management space, I ended up working for a company that was going public. And that gave me an opportunity to switch to a career as an IT auditor, working for the internal audit department, which I latched on to and have stayed with because I find it very enjoyable and because it gave me an opportunity to apply the knowledge I had of technology and especially the knowledge of analyzing data and understanding processes in my role, and it gave me a lot of career opportunities. I currently, as I mentioned, work for Synchrony, which Edgar already mentioned and gone over. I've worked for other companies in the Stamford, Connecticut area, including Pitney Bowes, GE Capital, and various consulting companies in the IT and audit space. As far as I go, in addition to moving to this SOX role in order to just find ways to automate our testing using Python and better leveraging data, I hope to bring more of the predictive analytics work or predictive analytics tools and to our repertoire of things that we can use in doing testing. A lot of the testing that I've written data analyses projects for in the past have been descriptive and diagnostic type testing, and that's a lot of what we teach in the Data Intelligence Academy. But I think there's a large opportunity for bringing predictive analytics into the internal audit space, into the risk management space, what we call the second line of defense in business, and also even to the first line of defense in terms of like monitoring of controls, monitoring of people's performance of different parts of the operation in a company.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a tremendous role for predictive analytics, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those tools. So thank you for bringing that up. And allow me to now turn it over to Alex. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at Rutgers.
Sure. I'm a professor of accounting and information systems at Rutgers. Predominantly Newark, I direct master's programs in professional accounting. I'm also director of the Teaching Excellence Center. Aside from teaching, I do a lot of supervision of PhD students. We're doing research in accounting education, digital assets. I'm also serving on the AICPA's FinRec, recently working with the Digital Assets Working Group for FinRec as well. I have a PhD in accounting and finance. My background, New York University, a proud grad of the LaPenta School, BBA in finance and MBA in accounting. My public accounting experience was at PwC and KPMG, and I did consulting at commercial investment banks, insurance companies, and I worked with trustee and bankruptcy, which I found fascinating. In the organization, of course, Rutgers Business School is located in 2 campuses. We're a research university and a member of the Big Ten Conference, which is an academic conference. I'd rather stay away from the sports because we don't do that well. But we are a part of a consortium where we can share research as well. And I guess my main focus will be on the education side, and I'll talk, I think, or address a lot of my experience from the research centers that are supported by Rutgers Business School, the Accounting Research Center and the Continuous Auditing Laboratory, where we do a lot of projects with corporations in data analytics and continuous auditing. The growth areas, I think, are the same that everyone's been saying. Aside from descriptive and diagnostic, we're going to see a lot more predictive analytics. I think we're going to see a lot more of artificial intelligence, text analysis, sentiment analysis, and using it in valuation, I think, is going to be something we'll see in the future. Okay.
Thank you for that. I definitely think there's a role for sports analytics. Maybe that's a way you'll get into sports at Rutgers, but thank you all, and welcome to you all. And Alex, welcome back. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in to the questions. And Jason, I'm going to start with you because the question is really focused on your clients. And I know as a managing director, you spend a tremendous amount of time working with C-level executives, CIOs, CEOs, CFOs. And I'm curious to know, when you're out with your clients, what are some of the skills that they're expecting to see from your junior consultants? Because we're going to assume that when our students graduate, they're graduating into junior consulting roles. And I'm curious to know what the expectation is of your clients around the space of data analytics.
It's a great question. You know, I also have the opportunity to spend a lot of time on campus doing recruiting still for my alma mater. So it's great to talk to students as well about this exact question. And I think what I often talk about is the need to develop this analytics mindset. So I think sometimes people focus too often on the tools, which is the flashy kind of cool thing. But tools change over time, right? We get smarter, and we're always going to have a newfangled tool that does something very cool. And that learning will come. But I think the harder thing to develop is that analytics mindset. And I think that's important because it makes those interactions with our clients so much better. So just to maybe illustrate this with a very simple example, you know, a lot of the times we go to our clients and perform inquiries, right? We ask them questions about changes that we're seeing in the financial statements or with a particular data set, right? And, you know, before we kind of were using data to the extent that we are today, those conversations were very high level. You know, a junior person, a staff might go to a controller and say, listen, can you tell me why revenues increased 5% this year, right? And get a very generic answer in response. Today, with data analytics, we're able to do a lot of that analysis before we even have that conversation with the client. And so we're able to see kind of what's going on, who's posting entries, where they're being posted, and maybe even have an idea of why. So instead of saying, why did revenues increase 5%? That conversation now turns to something like, why did Joe post this entry on this date in this area? And that's a much more meaningful conversation. And so that the client feels like it's a much better use of their time, and also feel like we're providing value because we're focusing on kind of the areas and the things that really matter most to them.
Great, thank you. And so you expect that your junior analysts will be able to work to get to that detailed level of data to have that more meaningful conversation.
That's right, that's right.
Thank you. Edgar, do you have an opinion based on your interactions with your clients on what they see in junior analysts and what their expectations are?
Yeah, I agree with Jason 100%, an analytics mindset for sure. And I may be asking for a lot, but I think even junior consultants should have that, not only the analytics mindset, but going a little bit deeper than that, just to know data governance, know analytic approach and methodology, data sources, how to locate data, acquire data, prepare it, manage it, and then having those skills, those basic coding skills that are needed. And then to top it all off, the visualization and reporting. It's almost like they should have an understanding of everything that I just mentioned at at least at a basic level, and anything above that will allow them to stand out from the crowd, right? And allow them to find those jobs that they probably, that everybody else is looking for, right? I think it just gives them that edge.
Right, how to differentiate themselves among everybody else that's applying for the same type of job.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Thank you. Charlie, what's your view on what clients are looking for?
I think I would just add, number one, if you're talking about hands-on skills, I would say Excel, SQL, Tableau are key entry-level tools. Excel's a bare minimum for pretty much anybody in business, though, not even just consultants or people working in entry-level data analytics positions. Tableau and SQL are key because they get you into those first-level roles a lot of times, and Python's rapidly becoming the default tool for everybody in the data science world, it seems like. So in the longer term, or even in the first 2 or 3 years, I would say people would want to pick up Python skills on a hands-on basis. And then educationally, prior to building those skills, some other courses that are going to be very useful to people that are new in the industry and new to the profession of data analysis would definitely want to look at courses in statistics or operations management. The statistics teach a lot of the basics underlying the data science, and the operations management teach a lot of those problem solving skills and how to apply statistics and other sort of discrete tools
Right.
In a custom way, not in a prepackaged software way to get certain tasks or achievements done.
Right. So thank you for that. And I want to pull on this thread a little bit about the tools. While I completely agree, you have to have a data analytics mindset. I just love that term, and I'm going to steal it. I do think that it is important for us to expose our students to various tools, and you mentioned quite a few. So I'd like to go back to Jason. Are there particular tools that you're seeing in the marketplace that you think our students should have some ability to tinker with and learn?
So I will say, like I said, the tools change over time a little bit. Even my career at EY, the tools have changed. Right now, for the type of work that we do, our folks spend a lot of time with Alteryx and with Power BI now.
Okay.
So on one hand, it's kind of a data prep, and we'll call it low code automation, and then data visualization. And so having kind of those basic skills to work with, manage, transform data, and then to visualize that, to tell a story and to derive insights for our clients are kind of the two pieces. And then, for us, at least in our business, that's kind of the bare minimum. And then we have specialists available that can do some of the, I'll say, higher level stuff. So if more, programming or Java or, anything else is needed, we've got specialists that can kind of help and supplement our teams to deliver that for clients.
Okay, thank you. And Edgar, your view on tools?
Yes, from a student's standpoint, I think it's very important to take advantage of the open source and the free software that's out there to learn, like using RStudio, using Python. Considering that their budget is probably limited, I would focus on those because those are up and coming in the industry, in many companies. So that would be a good step.
Okay, thank you. That's incredibly helpful because we are really looking into what we need to expose our students to as they go forward on their analytics journey. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a complement to tools and sort of the data analytics avenue of depth. When I think about T skills, when I talk to my students about their T skills, and I talk about data analytics being a horizontal set of skills, which incorporates a mindset, tools, things like cleansing, all the things we talked about here. There's also this need, I think, for them to spend some time focusing on industry. And I wanted your perspective based on what you're seeing. And Alex, I'm going to start with you. What industries do you think are most prevalent in using data analytics for building and differentiating their businesses?
Yeah, from what we're seeing at the research center, financial services is clearly growing. We've got work with some banks where we've looked at fraud detection, and if you think about what is done with following someone's buying patterns on credit cards. We've done some work with hedge funds, and in financial services, we've looked at machine learning and artificial intelligence to help them with predictive, as we mentioned earlier, and portfolio valuation. I can also say, I'm not sure how much of a growth industry this is, but clearly education we're investing quite a bit of money at Rutgers in data analytics. We not only try to help students, I think, understand a little bit more about their schedules and wherever else you need, but we've used audit analytics in ways for intervention. So, for example, we would have a complete database of indicator courses. And by indicator courses, I mean that if a student gets a certain grade, let's say in MIS or financial accounting, it's predicting how they will do in the rest of the program, and the advisors could come in and intervene at that point and add wise interventions. We also, right now, I can go on, we've got I guess the company's called EAB, and I can go on right now and get any student and pull a complete graph and chart and just know exactly where that student's been and how that student's been performing. So I think, that could be a big area. It's a big area for us. But we're seeing a lot again, as I said, financial services is one of our bigger areas.
Okay, thank you. I'd like Jason's perspective on this as well. Jason, in addition to financial services and potentially education, are there industries that you see that are investing very heavily in the data analytics space?
I think from my perspective, we actually see it across the board. For us, at least, it matters less about the industry and more about the client's desire to leverage data. Meaning, manufacturing, for example, like any manufacturer could use data, and some have used it to a great extent. But then you've got box manufacturers in Cleveland who have been, on the same mainframe system for the last, 30 years, and they just don't want to change. They don't, want to make that leap. And so they don't, right? And so that's an example of within the same industry, you might just have a very different view on analytics. So some are using it very aggressively to optimize that manufacturing process, and some have not yet caught the bug or seen the value. So we do see it across the board. I think what might change across industries is just the mix of the types of analytics, or even just more broadly, the use of technology. FSO or financial services, we see a lot more in the automation space because they're doing a lot of repetitive tasks across a broad portfolio of funds, for example. Whereas then some of our more technology, clients are SaaS revenue and things like that are doing more in the analytics around revenue. And so I think we just see a different mix of how they're using technology and analytics across those different industries.
That's a very interesting perspective. So some in terms of repetitive use, more using it for a competitive advantage, kind of interesting mix that way. Thank you. That's very interesting. Edgar, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, I can't think of any industry that's not using data analytics, but I definitely agree with Alex at financial services, and I'm a little biased because I've been in this industry for quite some time. The last couple of companies I worked for, the financial services industry is definitely using a lot more analytics.
Edgar, we're having a little bit of trouble with your microphone again. If you could maybe manipulate your microphone. Yes, that's better.
Sorry about that. So as I was saying, I agree with Alex. I don't really know of any industries that are not using data analytics, but the financial services industry is definitely using a lot more of it. And it's mainly using it, or mostly using it for to support their decisions, better decision making, or for what the service is for their clients and customers.
Thank you. I'm very intrigued by the fact that Rutgers is using analytics to identify students that potentially may be good candidates for these roles in the data analytics space. And I want to have a little bit more of that discussion, but in particular, rather than focusing on, gee, they're really good at, information systems, they got a great grade. I'd like your perspective on what are some of the other characteristics that you're finding in students that might make them good candidates for data analytics roles. So for instance, are they more analytical thinkers? Are they problem solvers? Or are they more critical thinkers? Or are they scientists? What are you seeing, Alex? I'm curious, what kind of students are you seeing that are getting excited and tend to thrive in these kinds of roles?
Yeah, I think what you said is true. I mean, I'm just looking at some things that I jotted down. Critical thinking, for sure, is one of the areas. I think the conversation earlier mentioned statistical skills or math skills. So I think you need to be comfortable with quantitative data, obviously. And I think a lot of the programs that we've been using lately have been really focused on that. And I think the other important point that we may not have mentioned is really a lot of the communication skills that because I think if you're going to have a data analytics mindset and you need to communicate that to the client, you're going to need to have those presentation skills and communication skills locked down as well. When we look at our course, I guess, presentations, or when we think about our levels of bringing in data analytics, I think Jason might have said it before, but we go from extract, transform, load, visualization, and then to analysis. So these are the levels that we go at, and the programming, I think, is kind of kicked up as you go down that list.
Thank you. I do believe that presentation skills are going to be incredibly valuable. I'm glad you brought that up. I'd like some others' perspectives on what they think are some of the skill sets, and some of the characteristics of students. Jason, what's your perspective on somebody who would thrive in a role like this?
I think it's, at least again, from my perspective and for our industry in public accounting, it's a little bit of everything, right? We have to be a little bit of jack of all trades, in that, on one hand, we're executing audit programs and need to have that kind of analytical thinking and critical thinking. But then at the end of the day, we turn around and present those results back to an audit committee, for example. And so being able to tell a story with data is just as important as the analysis itself, because if you can't get the point across, if you can't share those insights with our client, then all that's kind of for nothing, right? And so it is kind of a combination of all of that, the problem solving, critical thinking, presentation. It all kind of goes in together. And listen, it's not something that you develop all at once overnight. I don't want to give that impression. I've been doing what I've in this role in national for 10 years now, and we see a steady increase in our people's capability to do this. But it's a learning curve. It is a skill that you have to learn and practice over time. So I wouldn't expect anyone to kind of join EY and have all of those skills all at once, but it's definitely something that we want to continue to develop over time in our people.
Thank you. Charlie, can I ask you your perspective on what you're seeing?
Sure. I mean, in addition to what we've talked about so far as skills go, I think people who have a knack for being intuitive, for being able to look at a process or look at a transaction and understand what's happening quickly and sort of absorb it and then focus on the details. Those are key skills that focus on details and that ability to intuitively understand how things work, that are characteristics, I think, that would benefit anybody in the hands-on application of data and analytics, because you're very often being presented with new business process after new business process after new business process,
Right.
or new problem or new task, and it's be able to leap back and forth between those and quickly get an understanding, but then also being able to delve down into those details so that you can produce meaningful results for somebody else or some others who are more expert in the process itself or in the operation or the transaction or the task or project.
Right, thank you. I think, yeah, that ability to problem solve and be more intuitive is something that is it's hard to teach. It's something that you
Yes.
kind of have to identify that
Right.
somebody has, but it's a very insightful thing. Thank you for sharing that. I want to remind those of you who are present today that there is an open chat if you have a question that you want to ask. But also, I think if the time allows, since it's a fairly small group, we may just open it up and see if somebody wants to ask a question. But I do have a few more before we get to that. And this one is really focused in particular on data science. I know one of the things that we all try to do with our students is give them an opportunity to see areas where there's potential growth for new careers. And I know that this is a space that is just exploding in career opportunity and growth for our students. And I know they don't know a lot about it. Could you just give us a sense, you data scientists out there, of what are some of the specific skills that we should be helping our students understand they need to develop for a career in data science in particular? And Edgar, I'll start with you since that's what you do every day.
Yes, and can you hear me well?
I can.
All right, awesome.
I think that just the programming skills are key to data science, because that, you know, with the advanced analytics that we have now and the programming or the software that is available, the programming skills are just going to be critical.
Is there something in particular, programming, some particular type of programming?
Well, yeah, that like the Python and the R, statistical modeling, you know, those types of programming are going to be critical and key to success for advanced analytics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Alex, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think Edgar said exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, I think we do bring in a lot of Python, R, lots of programming in our auditing classes. We've also moved to Alteryx lately. It's one of the later, well, the newer ones that we brought into the mix. And I did mention text analysis, so we are starting to introduce TalkWalker into some of our classes, and that's become, and they're very excited about that because you can use social media, which everyone loves at that age, I guess, and we like it too, to you know, get sentiment and you're updating it in real time, and it's a very exciting program. So yeah, but I think the programming skills, the R, the Python, are very common in our courses. And like I said, Alteryx is the one that we just introduced this fall to some. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Charlie, it seems to me that you have an opinion. I'd love to hear it.
I was thinking about what was being said, and I guess I would include, well, I definitely agree with the Python and R and Alteryx. For Alteryx, to me, it's got a range of capabilities, and the same as Python and R, in that you can do low level or low code type of solutions where you don't have to be as proficient with the programming side. So that's a huge benefit of some of the more advanced tools that companies are purchasing. I also think database knowledge, understanding how databases works is kind of key, because as a data analyst, sometimes you're left on your own to get the data. Sometimes it's given to you, but when you have to get it on your own, there's a lot you can do to make yourself more productive, more efficient, if you understand how databases work and how the SQL programming language works.
I completely agree with that. What about data cleansing? No one's mentioned data cleansing, and once we talked about governance. What do we think about that? Charlie, you're nodding your head there.
It's a huge part of the hands-on work of data analysis is to clean the data. There are with tools like Alteryx, like SAS, like ACL, there are built-in functions that help you clean the data, but the further and deeper you get into using very, very large data sets within the big data category, you start to have to become more knowledgeable about how to build your own solutions for cleaning the data, as well as using some of the built-in ones, because you come into very custom issues. So that's where having a deeper understanding of the technologies involved, of what kinds of defects you can have in the data, would come into play. So, but that, again, as someone was mentioning earlier, is built up over time in your career. I think Jason mentioned you do build up some of those techniques over time. Right.
And Alex, you mentioned governance earlier, so I'm sure that's another area that you think is critical.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to just do a little bit of a broadening beyond data science and go back to the role of analytics in particular, because one of the questions that came to me, which I thought was very interesting, was the role of project management skills and Six Sigma types of skills. And I'm curious to know if you think that that would be beneficial coming into your organizations from students coming out of Iona, if they understood those concepts, if they had some exposure to project management capabilities. Jason, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think it honestly depends on the type of company that you're going into. And the reason I say that is, in some cases, having that Six Sigma mindset where you're the only person as you walk in the room that has that mindset can be very difficult, right? And so, that specifically might just depend on where you're at. But I think understanding general project management skills is very important, because I think a lot of the projects that we're talking about, as we've even discussed today, have multiple phases to them, whether that's data extraction and collection, transformation, loading, visualization, analysis. This could take quite a while and involve a great number of people as well. So you might be involved in the entire project, you might be involved with just part of it. So being able to kind of project out and help plan what that looks like, I think is very valuable. And then add on to that, for us at least, you're also managing multiple clients at the same time. So understanding how to manage your time and your team's time are critical skills.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Charlie, what's your view of that?
So a lot of my experience comes from what would be considered manufacturing or financial services. And in both of those industries, there's a pretty heavy use of Lean, of Six Sigma, of Agile, Scrum, Waterfall methodologies. I would say that those project management techniques, the companies that are large companies will be training you on those particular techniques when you get there, because it's important to them and they live and breathe by it. Right. It's never a bad thing to go into the company already understanding them, though. Mm-hmm. And I would say, particularly if you're looking at a very technical career in the data space, such as a data engineer, or someone involved with extract, load, transform processes, or with building front ends, if you get anywhere into the IT focused side of business, understanding Agile and Scrum now is going to be really useful coming into the company, because you're going to get thrown into projects right away that are running that way. And it's a very particular way of running a project.
Right. Thank you. Alex, do you focus on that at Rutgers?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we, as I mentioned before we started, it's in our operations analysis core, and it's a required course. So everyone will be taking courses that deal with cycle time improvements and minimization of defects, and Six Sigma certainly fits in there. So I know we're emphasizing that it's required. All our students will have it when they leave the program.
So this, we're getting to the end of the questions that I'm going to be asking, but this one is a little bit different in that I would like to know your opinion on whether or not you think students should take a class in ethics. And the reason I say that is because I bring this up in my class all the time, that being responsible for data is, often an ethical issue. And I'd love to have your appreciation for what you think about a class in ethics as it relates to responsibility of data, analysis of that data, privacy of that data, et cetera. So Charlie, can I ask you your view on ethics?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as an internal auditor, ethics is something that I want to, hope that every employee in my company understands. As far as in the data analytics space specifically, there are so many regulations tied to ethics, and it would be easy to violate them accidentally, even not even maliciously. Good point. I think ethics should be a priority in financial services, healthcare. There's a tremendous amount of regulatory requirements or legal requirements around it. Plus, I just think it's better in general for business. When you look at things like the consultant working for Amazon who released data of Amazon's customers to the web, it put the brakes on a lot of financial services moves to cloud technology, because they're like, well, can we trust the cloud vendors? Mm-hmm. So ethics can really impact your company, and I think it should be a requirement. It's something that should be a really significant part of data analytics. And I think a couple of people have mentioned data governance today. We live and breathe by it now. It's very important that you handle the data correctly that you have, especially when it has personal or private information like credit card data or healthcare
Right.
data.
Exactly. Thank you, Charlie. Jason, what's your view?
Yeah, Charlie said it really well. I mean, as external auditors, we're also regulated ourselves, right? And so we have a long list of things that we need to do to act ethically, to protect our clients' data and things like that. And so it is very, very important for us. I think beyond kind of the regulation as well, I think there's an interesting debate going on in the community at large around the ethics of how we use that data. I think you see, everyone probably sees in the news themselves how data can be manipulated and shown to, boost any number of differing opinions, right? And so I think it's important for us to understand how to use data ethically to, show the full picture and not just the picture of the person who's paying the bills, if you will. And so I think that is something that's kind of new, I think, with data analytics, and something I think most students wouldn't even think about, that there's an opinion based into data, because you think data is data, right? It's just there, but it can be manipulated to tell a story. And so I think understanding that and talking about the pros and cons, I think, is very important.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I had a similar experience in a classroom where I posed a problem and a student just thought this is the right answer. And I said, maybe it is, and maybe the data supports something else. So you're right. There's a huge responsibility that I think has to be shared. And thank you for sharing that with me. What I'd like to do now is open it up. I know we have a couple of questions in the chat. And then before I close, I'll ask each of you a final question. So Catherine, do you want to take a look at what's going on in the chat and see if we can answer some of those questions?
Absolutely. So the first question that came up in the chat was, we've talked about the basic skills that students need, but when you are first taking a look at somebody's resume or computerized profile, what are the first things that you look at to judge these skills when you're going through the interviewing process?
Feel free to jump in. Jason, do you want to start? Give us a sense of what you look for.
I can start. Yeah, I can start. Now, it's an interesting question. I think some of that comes through on the resume through experience with data, right? So, for us, right, we're hiring, financial majors, accounting majors, with maybe, a minor in some of these other areas like information systems and things like that. And so sometimes they'll have some practical experience, whether that's on the job or certain clubs at school or something like that. But a lot of the times that comes through with how we talk to them in those interviewing questions, where we talk about certain situations and how they would react to in certain ways. And so a lot of that just comes through that discussion and seeing how they think through problems, right? Are they coming with a preconceived notion and just saying, this is my answer? Are they thinking about the situation and applying a different perspective? So some of that just comes through, I think, the actual interview process rather than the skills on the resume all the time.
Thank you. Edgar, do you have a perspective?
Yeah, you can hear me well.
Keep talking and I'll let you know.
Great. So I really look for passion, desire, drive, and I look for when candidates can tell me and show me that they've learned these things on their own, that they've learned these types of different software on their own. They weren't pushed to learn it. They just have that desire to learn it. And they're the individuals that, like me, could be up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure things out, because it's just the love for analytics and the passion and the drive. Those are the kind of individuals that I kind of look for when I'm doing an interview.
Interesting. Do you see anything on a resume that would give you that indication, or is it mostly the interview that you rely on?
Mostly the interview, but a lot of times on the resume, they do indicate, that they learned this on their own. Very rarely, but I'll ask those questions. I will ask, so how did you learn Python? How did you learn RStudio? What did you do to get to where you are?
Interesting. Thank you. Charlie, what's your view?
I was thinking about some examples I've seen on resumes and on people's LinkedIn pages where they've linked to Tableau dashboards or Alteryx projects or other types of data analysis competitions they've been involved in, like those sponsored through the website kaggle.com. And that adds to me, it gives me the opportunity to look at some of their work, whether it was a school project or something they did independently using a public data set off of Kaggle. And they presented their work, and it shows me how they were thinking through a problem or an idea or a hypothesis. Those are really great ways on a resume or on your LinkedIn page to communicate that, number one, your love of problem solving, your initiative, like Edgar was just discussing, and your ability to actually produce something with the knowledge and the tools that you have at hand. So I would say those would be a great add to a resume or a LinkedIn page.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, I think we have another question.
Yes, we have a few more. The next question was, we were talking a lot about the data analytics mindset, and we were talking about a lot of the requirements that we have for positions that might be slightly more technical in nature. But what do you see as the basics for any business school graduate? That what is the basic tool set that they should be coming out with as they graduate in terms of analytics?
Edgar, would you like to? Go ahead, Jason, jump in.
No, I was just going to jump in and say, I think, like I said, any tool that just demonstrates the knowledge is good. So if we take the kind of big categories, right, like data extraction and transformation, and maybe then visualization and analysis as maybe two big buckets, right? As long as you're learning something in those skills, right? So whether it's like Tableau, Spotfire, Power BI, I don't think it matters, at least to me, which one specifically you've learned, because I think once you get those concepts, right, of how to visualize data, for example, that's more easily transferred to these other tools. And so I think whatever the school is using or what skills you're developing in some of these other clubs, or I think Charlie mentioned some of these other competitions outside, I think just learning some of those skills and any of those tools would show that you at least understand those concepts. What does it take to transform data, right? Once you've done it in one tool, you just apply the same concept to another.
Anyone else want to jump in?
This is Edgar. Yeah, I totally agree with Jason.
It's just a matter of which one you want to learn first. And if cost is an issue, learn a Python, learn RStudio, learn those open source free software. There's plenty of training out there that you can do on your own. So just grab one and get into it.
Thank you. Catherine, we have another question.
Yes, one other question. So in terms of a little bit of insight as to what students may be experiencing as they enter into your firms, we wanted some insights as to, what do you do in-house in order to provide training in technical areas and to help your employees to build their competencies in this area?
So
Go ahead.
this is Charlie. Within Synchrony, Edgar runs a Data Intelligence Academy program, which we have been inviting not just members of internal audit into, but also members of the business into to provide training. And then we're sort of outsourcing our knowledge by recording it and saving it to our learning management system as we move more into Python. We're also recording some of that. We just recently shared some Python instruction that was made part of the enterprise data lake training that we have at Synchrony for our growing enterprise data lake. So I would say, that's a big part of it is companies will provide various types of training that are tied to sometimes the tools that they use. So at Synchrony, for us, it's SAS and Python primarily right now. But absolutely, companies do have those kind of tracks. And then our business leadership program has a track, I believe, number one in internal audit, which includes analytics exposure, and may also, I believe, have an analytics track as well.
Does EY do training?
We do. I would say our training is probably 2 tracks. So one is I'll say the end user, meaning so most of our auditors, right, kind of the baseline expectation. Now we have the benefit that we are embedding analytics into our actual audit work plans, right? And so as part of that, then as you learn how to audit revenue, these days we're teaching how to audit revenue with data. And so that comes with learning whatever tool of choice that we are using. And sometimes that's a third party, but a lot of the times, especially in the past, it's been a custom tool that we've built for our purposes. And so that's why, in my mind, the tool doesn't matter, because when you come over, we're going to probably teach you a new tool anyway. And so we do that, but then we also offer, I will say, advanced training for those that want to go build solutions, whether that's in Alteryx or Power BI or whatever, to do more custom analytics on their engagements. And so teams or individuals can go and learn those skills. And in fact, we kind of gamified it a little bit recently with a badging program. So people can earn badges in different aspects of data and analytics, and now AI and all sorts of other technologies to help continue to build those skills.
Great. Thank you. Catherine, I think we have time for another question.
Okay, we have a question. What do you think the most important component of analytics is? The descriptive nature, the predictive nature, or the prescriptive nature of analytics?
I guess saying all is not a good enough answer.
This is Charlie. I would think descriptive is just fundamental to the other two. Descriptive analytics are going to lead you a lot of times to whatever your hypothesis or proposed test or analysis you want to do on the predictive or prescriptive side. So I would say descriptive, without a doubt, is the first thing you need to know how to do.
I mean, for us, it's in our research, it's predictive. We're working on lots of models right now to predict the price of crypto assets. And we're using a lot of data analytics and artificial intelligence and the like. So, but the others, of course, are important as well.
Thank you. And I think, Catherine, we have one more question from the chat. So let's make sure we cover that one and see where we are.
Yes, it's just basically asking you to, how do you articulate the analytics mindset? And that's pretty open-ended.
And Jason, I think you coined that phrase, so we'll launch you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to. So we think about it with kind of four aspects. So the first is asking the right questions. So having that kind of critical thinking, asking the right questions. The second piece is understanding that ETL process, right? Extracting, transforming, and loading data. The third is applying those data analysis techniques. And then the last one is interpreting and sharing the results with our stakeholders. So that might be the client, it might be someone internal, whatever. So those are the kind of the four big aspects we think about when we talk about the analytics mindset.
Thank you. So I'll wrap it up. Sorry, go ahead, Alex. No, go ahead.
Jason, isn't that I've seen that in some E&Y publications. Is that sort of what the firm follows? It's sort of a...
That's right. Our academic resource center.
That's right.
We collaborated with them to create some curriculum around this. So you
exactly
get bonus points, Alex.
Thank you. Hey, I like EY. Yeah.
So let's just end with a quick kind of fun question. If you could describe the future of business analytics in one word, what would it be? Charlie, I'm going to call on you first.
Darn it. The future, I would describe one word, machine learning.
Okay, Edgar.
Oh, Charlie took mine.
You can have the same one.
It is, but maybe I'll say something else. Progressing.
Interesting. Jason.
I'll say exciting.
And Alex?
Possibilities.
Wonderful. George? please feel free to close, but I want to thank you all for a really great interactive discussion. This was fabulous. And on behalf of Iona and the LaPenta School of Business, we are incredibly grateful.